Welcome to Globewise Entertainment. Today we're diving deep into the shadows of cinema to uncover 12 controversial war films Hollywood tried to bury, powerful, provocative, and sometimes painfully real stories that the studios didn't want you to see. These aren't your typical war blockbusters. They're films that challenged authority, exposed uncomfortable truths, and paid the price with limited releases, media silence, or flat-out rejection. So grab your popcorn and prepare to be surprised. Some of these titles might just change the way you see war on screen. Haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet? Hit that subscribe button now and join our growing community of film lovers who crave the untold and the unforgettable. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, which of these buried war films shocked you the most or deserves a second chance? 1. Casualties of War 1989. The truth too disturbing for Hollywood. In 1989, acclaimed director Brian De Palma took a massive creative risk with Casualties of War, a harrowing Vietnam War drama that Hollywood never quite knew what to do with. Based on a true story first reported in The New Yorker, the film follows a young soldier, played by Michael J. Fox, who witnesses the unthinkable, the abduction, assault, and murder of a Vietnamese girl by members of his own platoon, led by a chillingly unhinged sergeant played by Sean Penn. The film dives into the horrifying moral collapse that war can trigger, asking viewers to confront the darkest side of military conflict, not enemy brutality, but the inhumanity within a soldier's own ranks. But Casualties of War was buried almost as soon as it was released. Audiences weren't ready. Critics praised its honesty, but mainstream America looked away. Why? The film didn't fit the traditional Hollywood war narrative. It wasn't about heroism or brotherhood. It was about guilt, trauma, and silence. Behind the scenes, studio executives were uncomfortable with the graphic nature of the story and its refusal to offer redemption. Marketing was minimal. The box office was lukewarm. And within months, it was quietly pulled from theaters, left to become a forgotten relic of too much truth. Today, Casualties of War stands as one of the most emotionally devastating and morally urgent war films ever made. One that Hollywood tried to erase because it showed war not as glorious, but as grotesque. 2. The Deer Hunter 1978. The psychological war that divided audiences. When The Deer Hunter hit theaters in 1978, it was hailed as a cinematic triumph, sweeping 5 Academy Awards including Best Picture and Best Director. But beneath the applause was a storm of controversy that Hollywood has quietly tried to forget. Directed by Michael Cimino, this haunting Vietnam War drama wasn't just about the battlefield. It was about the emotional wreckage left behind, PTSD, fractured friendships, and the moral cost of survival. The film followed 3 working-class friends from a steel town, played by Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, and John Savage, as their lives unraveled during and after the war. What made The Deer Hunter so controversial? 2 words: Russian roulette. The brutal scenes of Vietnamese captors forcing American POWs to play the deadly game sparked outrage. Critics and veterans alike condemned the scenes as historically inaccurate and racially insensitive, accusing the film of portraying the Vietnamese people as sadistic caricatures. Even more incendiary was the claim that Cimino fabricated certain wartime horrors for dramatic effect, including the infamous roulette sequence, which had no documented basis in reality. Anti-war activists and historians slammed the film as dangerous propaganda, and some film festivals even refused to screen it. To this day, The Deer Hunter remains a masterpiece wrapped in moral debate. Was it an artistic exploration of trauma, or a manipulative distortion of history? One thing is certain: Hollywood may have celebrated it at the Oscars, but over time, the industry has grown eerily quiet about this war epic's darker legacy. 3. Coming Home 1978. A love story wrapped in protest. In 1978, Coming Home hit theaters like a quiet storm, less about the battlefield and more about the war waged within. Starring Jane Fonda, Jon Voight, and Bruce Dern, the film painted a deeply human portrait of the Vietnam War's psychological aftermath, something Hollywood had long avoided. Fonda plays Sally, a military wife who volunteers at a VA hospital while her husband is deployed. There she meets Luke, a paraplegic veteran whose soul is as shattered as his body. As their bond deepens, Coming Home evolves into a radical film, not because of explosions or combat scenes, but because it dared to show the cost of war through intimacy, trauma, and unexpected love. But controversy wasn't far behind. Jane Fonda was already a lightning rod for criticism due to her outspoken anti-war activism, dubbed Hanoi Jane by her detractors. That political baggage brought outrage to the film, with some branding it unpatriotic and dangerous. Though it won 3 Oscars, including Best Actor for Voight and Best Actress for Fonda, Coming Home was quietly pushed out of the mainstream conversation. Networks hesitated to rerun it. Some theaters avoided it, and the film slowly disappeared from the war canon, eclipsed by more conventional, gung-ho narratives. Yet Coming Home remains one of the most emotionally raw and politically courageous war films ever made. An unflinching reminder that the wounds of war aren't always visible, and that Hollywood doesn't always celebrate the films that dare to tell the harder truths. 4. Hearts and Minds, 1974. Directed by Peter Davis. Genre: documentary, controversy level. In the aftermath of the Vietnam War, few films dared to show the raw, brutal, and emotional truths behind America's role in the conflict. But in 1974, Hearts and Minds exploded onto the screen, and almost got buried for it. Peter Davis's documentary didn't hold back. It tore into the American military-industrial complex, exposed the trauma inflicted on Vietnamese civilians, and juxtaposed U.S. government rhetoric with the devastating images of war-torn villages and grieving families. For many viewers, it was the first time they saw the Vietnam War not as a patriotic mission, but as a moral and political catastrophe. One of the most controversial scenes showed a U.S. general stating that the Oriental doesn't put the same high price on life as does a Westerner, immediately followed by the heart-wrenching footage of a Vietnamese funeral. This jarring editing choice was a bold indictment of American attitudes, and it sparked furious backlash. Despite winning the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, Hearts and Minds was almost suppressed. Columbia Pictures, under pressure from conservative politicians and Vietnam veterans groups, delayed its release. The studio executives feared the film would ignite public outrage, and they were right. Veterans protested. The government bristled. Critics were divided. Some called it un-American, while others hailed it as one of the most powerful anti-war statements ever filmed. Hollywood didn't know what to do with it. Networks refused to air it. Distributors backed off. And so, Hearts and Minds was buried in limited releases in academic circles, rarely seen by the public for decades. Today, it's considered a landmark in documentary filmmaking, and a haunting reminder of how cinema can challenge power and pay the price. 5. Redacted 2007. Too Real for Hollywood? Directed by Brian De Palma, Redacted is one of the most explosive and controversial war films of the 2000s. Inspired by the real-life Mahmadiyya rape and murder case during the Iraq War, the film is a gut-wrenching portrayal of wartime brutality, psychological breakdowns, and the blurred lines between soldier and war criminal. Redacted uses a found-footage style to immerse viewers in the raw chaos of war. But it wasn't just the style that stirred outrage. It was the subject matter. The film depicts American soldiers committing unspeakable atrocities against an Iraqi family, an unflinching mirror to a scandal that the military and media largely tried to bury. De Palma said he made the film to redress the pictures we never see in the American media. But the backlash was swift. It was pulled from some theaters, condemned by military groups, and attacked for being unpatriotic. Even major studio backers distanced themselves from it. To this day, Redacted is rarely talked about in mainstream film circles, a buried time bomb of truth Hollywood wasn't ready to handle. 6. Paths of Glory 1957. The war movie that dared to tell the truth. In a decade filled with patriotic World War II epics, Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory was a punch to the gut, and not everyone was ready for it. Set during World War I, this stark, black-and-white film follows Colonel Dax, played by Kirk Douglas, as he defends 3 innocent French soldiers accused of cowardice after a failed attack. But the real villain isn't the enemy. It's the corrupt military hierarchy itself. The film boldly exposed the cruelty, incompetence, and class prejudice of the upper command, portraying war not as heroism, but as a machine that chews up lives for the pride of generals. Censors and politicians didn't like what they saw. The French government outright banned the film until 1975, claiming it was offensive to their military. In some U.S. cities it faced resistance too, labeled as anti-military and un-American, at the height of Cold War patriotism. Kubrick's fearless vision may have hurt the film commercially at the time, but over the years Paths of Glory has become a powerful anti-war classic, and one of the most important buried treasures in Hollywood history. 7. Johnny Got His Gun, 1971. The anti-war masterpiece Hollywood tried to forget. Imagine waking up, unable to see, hear, speak, or move, trapped inside your own body with only your thoughts as company. That's the brutal reality at the heart of Johnny Got His Gun, a haunting and uncompromising anti-war film that Hollywood never quite knew how to handle. Directed by Dalton Trumbo, one of the most blacklisted screenwriters during the McCarthy era, Johnny Got His Gun tells the story of Joe Bonham, a young American soldier who becomes a living shell after being hit by an artillery shell in World War I. Limbless, faceless, and voiceless, Joe is kept alive by machines as he silently screams for death. But no one can hear him. Adapted from Trumbo's own 1939 novel, the film is a surreal, psychological descent into the horrors of war and the inhumanity of keeping someone alive against their will. It was released during the height of the Vietnam War, and its message was unapologetically clear. War doesn't make heroes, it destroys them. The film was critically praised but quickly buried by the industry. Its bleak narrative and anti-war stance were seen as too controversial for mass audiences. Mainstream theaters avoided it, and TV networks wouldn't touch it. Even when it gained cult status, partly due to its footage being used in Metallica's One music video in the late 80s, it remained a shadowy ghost of a film few dared to revisit. Hollywood, with its history of glorifying warfare and patriotism, simply didn't have room for a film this raw, this honest, this angry. But for those who have seen it, Johnny Got His Gun is unforgettable. A chilling reminder of the true cost of war, both seen and unseen. 8. The Battle of Algiers, 1966. Coming in at number 8 is a film so realistic and politically explosive that it was banned, censored, and feared by multiple governments. We're talking about the Battle of Algiers, the 1966 masterpiece that Hollywood buried but history could never ignore. Directed by Gillo Pontecorvo, this black-and-white Italian-Algerian film doesn't just depict war. It drops you right into the gritty, heart-pounding streets of Algiers during the brutal Algerian War for independence from French colonial rule. But what made it so dangerous? The Battle of Algiers was shot in a raw documentary style, so authentic that many believed it used actual news footage. It didn't. Every scene was carefully crafted to show both the violence of the French military and the desperate tactics of the Algerian resistance. It humanized both sides, terrorists and soldiers alike, and that nuanced honesty made it powerful and threatening. The French government banned it for years. It was too honest, too uncomfortable, too revealing of colonial violence. In the US, it was never truly embraced by Hollywood. Why? Because it challenged the West's narrative on imperialism and counterinsurgency at the height of the Vietnam War. Even the Pentagon studied it, not to ban it but to learn from it. That's how realistic and raw it was. Despite its excellence, the film was buried under political fear. No Oscar love. No American box office glory. It was just too bold. And yet, the Battle of Algiers remains one of the most influential war films ever made. A cinematic grenade that Hollywood was too afraid to hold. On-screen text/visual cue suggestions. Grainy footage from the film with intense street protests and military raids. Quote overlay. This film contains scenes that may be disturbing. It has been banned in several countries. Archival newspaper headlines. French ban Battle of Algiers. Cut to modern military personnel watching the film in training, based on real Pentagon reports. End with, some wars are fought with guns. Others are buried in film canisters. 9. The Boys and Company C. 1978. The Forgotten Cry of Disillusionment. Released in the shadow of America's post-Vietnam trauma, The Boys and Company C dared to tell a story that few in Hollywood, or the public, were ready to confront. Directed by Sidney J. Furie, this gritty and unflinching drama follows 5 young Marine recruits from boot camp to the brutal jungles of Vietnam. But unlike the heroic war epics of earlier decades, this film stripped away the glamour and replaced it with bureaucracy, manipulation, and raw futility. What made The Boys and Company C so controversial was its brutally honest portrayal of how soldiers were dehumanized, not just by war, but by their own government. In one of the film's most gut-wrenching moments, the squad is offered a ticket home if they throw a soccer match against the local Vietnamese team to boost morale and propaganda. The chilling message? Lives were pawns, and winning the war wasn't always the priority. While Apocalypse Now and Platoon would later be celebrated for their anti-war commentary, The Boys and Company C came too early and was largely buried. Critics praised its courage, but studios gave it a cold shoulder, afraid of backlash in a nation still bleeding from its wounds. Today it's rarely mentioned, despite being one of the first Vietnam War films to break the silence and challenge the official narrative. This forgotten gem deserves a second life, not just as a war film, but as a warning about the cost of blind obedience and the moral compromises made in the name of politics. 10. The Pentagon Wars 1998. Exposing the absurdity behind military spending. In a world where war films often glorify heroism or recount battlefield bravery, the Pentagon Wars dared to do something radically different. It ridiculed the military-industrial complex from the inside out. Released in 1998 as an HBO original movie, The Pentagon Wars stars Kelsey Grammer and Carrie Elwes in a darkly comedic retelling of a very real scandal. The film dramatizes the absurd 17-year development of the Bradley fighting vehicle, a project plagued by incompetence, infighting, and political cover-ups. Based on the whistleblowing book by Air Force Colonel James G. Burton, the story details how the vehicle was more dangerous to its own soldiers than to enemy forces. What made the Pentagon Wars so controversial wasn't just its unflinching satire. It was how accurately it portrayed the behind-the-scenes dysfunction of the U.S. Department of Defense. The movie showed how billions were wasted on a vehicle that couldn't perform its intended functions, and how those who tried to intervene were silenced or pushed out. Unsurprisingly, the film was buried in mainstream media coverage. Despite critical acclaim for its boldness and wit, it received minimal promotion outside of HBO, and was effectively ignored by Hollywood studios, likely due to its biting criticism of the military-industrial complex, which remains a sensitive topic in Washington and in the entertainment industry. Today, the Pentagon Wars remains a hidden gem, part political satire, part tragicomedy, and an all-too-true warning about what happens when power and money go unchecked in the name of national defense. 11. Rescue Dawn 2006. Directed by the always bold Werner Herzog and starring Christian Bale, Rescue Dawn was based on the real-life story of U.S. Navy pilot Dieter Dengler, who was shot down and captured during the Vietnam War. You'd think this harrowing tale of survival, escape, and raw courage would be celebrated in Hollywood. But instead it was quietly buried. Despite Bale's transformative performance and Herzog's gripping direction, Rescue Dawn struggled with controversy even before it hit theaters. Herzog had previously made a documentary on Dengler titled Little Dieter Needs to Fly, but when he dramatized the story into a feature film, he faced heavy criticism, including from the family members of other POWs portrayed in the film. They accused Herzog of fictionalizing details and disrespecting the memory of their loved ones. Behind the scenes, there were also bitter disputes over distribution rights and marketing. The film was left with little promotion, and many moviegoers never even knew it existed. Released in the shadow of larger war epics, Rescue Dawn quietly disappeared from the spotlight despite rave reviews. Was it too emotionally raw? Too anti-heroic? Or simply lost in the noise of Hollywood politics? One thing's for sure, Rescue Dawn remains one of the most underrated war survival films of the 21st century, and a powerful testament to one man's unbreakable will to live. 12. Tigerland 2000. the gritty war film Hollywood let slip through the cracks. In the year 2000, director Joel Schumacher, best known for glossy blockbusters like Batman Forever, took a bold and unexpected turn. He released Tigerland, a raw, low-budget war drama that dared to strip the genre of its usual heroics and spectacle. Set in 1971 during the final days before U.S. troops were shipped to Vietnam, the film focused not on battlefield explosions, but on the mental battlefield of the young soldiers preparing to go. At the heart of Tigerland was a breakout performance by a then-unknown Irish actor named Colin Farrell. He played Private Roland Boz, a rebellious and fiercely independent recruit who questions authority, challenges the morality of war, and tries to save his fellow soldiers from being sent to a war they don't believe in. Boz is the anti-war hero Hollywood rarely embraces, a man who fights not for glory, but against the very system trying to turn him into a killer. The film's setting was Tigerland itself, an infamous training camp in Louisiana designed to simulate the brutal conditions of Vietnam. But rather than glorify war, the movie served as a quiet protest against it. The shaky handheld camera work, natural lighting, and intimate dialogue gave it an almost documentary feel. It was real. Too real, perhaps. Despite its strong critical reception and deep emotional core, Tigerland was largely ignored by major studios and given only a limited release. It was buried not for being bad but for being too honest. Its anti-establishment themes, lack of patriotic framing, and refusal to deliver the kind of action Hollywood often prefers made it a hard sell during a time when the U.S. military image was still tightly controlled. And yet, over the years, Tigerland has become a cult favorite, quietly respected by film buffs and veterans alike for its authenticity and courage. It's one of those films that dared to ask uncomfortable questions and paid the price with silence. Hollywood didn't ban Tigerland, but it did something just as effective. It looked the other way. And that's a wrap from Globewise Entertainment. These 12 controversial war films may have been buried by Hollywood, but today we brought them back into the light, where their bold messages and unforgettable stories rightfully belong. From anti-war rebellions to raw truths the studios tried to silence, each of these films challenges the way we see conflict, courage, and control. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and never miss a deep dive into cinema's most hidden, censored, and powerful stories. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and let us know. Which of these buried war films shocked you the most, or deserves a new spotlight? We're reading every response.